Hello everyone, today we are looking at metalsmithing and the beginning steps of creating a piece of jewelry. So what we have are some sketches to start off with. We also did a little bit of research. We found some paper, some things online that might interest us in inspiring us to make jewelry. So the first thing I did was I looked up handmade metal jewelry. I looked up handmade metal specific pieces of jewelry that I wanted, like a handmade metal bracelet or handmade metal necklace, things like that. And then found some ideas from handmade metal jewelry, but I also wanted to look at some other things like being inspired by nature. And I looked up black and white symbols of leaves or black and white flower design. And I also was inspired by maybe even, this is a bookshelf, but the form of this is really nice. This is a Celtic symbol, so cultural symbols could be interesting. So animals, anything that you find interesting could really be a good way to be inspired and to create jewelry. So even if we're not making something like filled with all these gemstones, if you like the shape of something and you can imagine it as maybe even with different materials, different types of stones, that could be something that you want to include in your gathering of images. So I really started to focus then on making something using sort of this leafy pattern. And those patterns that research turned into sketches. So I'll show you some of the sketches I have. These are ones that, I was thinking of some different ideas, and then eventually I kind of started to focus on drawing out this leafy pattern and then these variations down here as earrings. So this is my first one. I thought it was a little too big. And then I decided that this one was a little bit better. I liked the angle, added a little more detail here. And then as I worked my way through some of these little earring pieces, I decided eventually on, which one did I do? Actually, I decided on this one without the top. So the next step is to trace it onto a piece of tracing paper. And I have, so I traced my first design twice, and these are going to be a pair of earrings. I want to make sure I trace it with a Sharpie pen so that it doesn't rub, the graphite of the pencil will rub off as we're working, but the Sharpie will stay on the paper. I also have a tracing of the necklace design that I want to make, and for this particular project, it's all about cutting and filing, piercing, sanding, polishing, a little bit of forming maybe, but we won't be soldering anything. These are solid pieces of metal that we're going to cut from a sheet of metal, and we're going to turn into those forms. So first part I'll show you is how to place your template onto the sheet of metal. Okay, so here we go. I am going to place this one onto a scrap that I have, and I always like to look through scraps first before I pull out a new sheet. Sometimes you'll find exactly what you need, and you can just use a little piece of that and save the scrap for later. And we never ever throw any of our scraps away. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take the back of this and take some of my rubber cement, and I want to just get a really thin layer. So I'm going to get most of that glue off, and I'm going to put a real thin coating of the glue on my paper. And I've kind of figured out that I'm going to use this little section right here. I'm going to get a little bit more glue, and I'm going to spread some glue really thinly over the section that I'm going to put the paper on. I do not want to make this thick. I don't want to have big clumps of glue. And I am going to do what's called a dry mount. I'm going to actually let these dry. You can wave them around, blow on them, let them dry for a moment, and then we'll put them together. So now these pieces have dried enough to where it doesn't look real shiny, and it really was just a few seconds that I waved them around, blew on them a little bit, and now I want to take this transparent sheet and I want to get it as close as I can to the edge so that I'm not wasting any metal. In fact, if you have straight edges, you can line your design right up to the edge, and then you save yourself that cut. So I've got it close up here in the middle. I'm gonna rub it on. This is repositionable if I needed to peel it up. If I got it wrong, I could peel it up and then place it in a new spot. All this extra glue that's here, once it's dry, we'll just rub away. And then any extra paper that's hanging out, you can just kind of pull from underneath, tear it off. I don't have much here, but if you had a bunch, you could just tear that off from underneath. So now I'm going to take this to the guillotine and go ahead and cut this out of this block. You don't have to do it, but because I have a guillotine, I'll go ahead and get this extra bit of metal off of it and out of my way. So here's the guillotine. This is a really nice tool I sort of have the luxury of having, that I can take metal and cut it into smaller pieces for my students, and get it as close as I can to the piece and just cut that off. So this piece is a 24 gauge metal. I'm using a little bit thinner gauge metal. This is a brass, and it cut really easy on the guillotine. I'll take the scrap and put it back into my scrap box and save it. I think I'm also going to cut this piece off just to get that piece out of the way, and because I can get pretty close here. All right, and also still saving all the little tiny pieces too. And especially when I have multiple students that might need the same sheet of metal, I'll go ahead and I'm going to try to cut this one out as best I can to get it off of this enormous sheet. And this is how I order them. They come in sheets that are 6 by 12. And then we can cut them down into smaller pieces for student use. Now I'm not going to be able to cut with the guillotine really well here, so this is just going to be a piece I'm going to have to cut off later with my saw. So I am ready to show you how to pierce.